this is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome to another edition of Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV, where we find the facts, kill the spin and tell it like it is as best we can. Going to be a rather busy show today, but on one main subject, Keir Starmer's troubles. If you've watched the news at all recently, you'll realise that Keir Starmer is, in my view at least, totally adrift, a passenger in his own government. A man who is giving full confidence to his British ambassador, Lord Peter Mandelson, in the United States, and within 24 hours, sacking him for information which he claims he got after giving the man full confidence. Well, that doesn't give me full confidence in the Prime Minister, somebody who apparently failed to notice that there was a little local difficulty with Peter Mandelson, somebody who's been fired twice before, then third time unlucky. The context here, of course, is even bigger than that. He's already lost Angela Rayner, his deputy prime minister, who also, in a huff or a fit of pique, resigned from being deputy leader of the Labour Party, prompting an election, which I guess Keir Starmer has managed to get to run his way due to the ridiculously high bar to stand in that election. Essentially, he just wants a lackey, somebody who's not going to cause him trouble in that position. On top of all of that, we've got Rachel Reeves, another fellow passenger, watching the economy do whatever the economy does, apparently unable to do anything with it. And across the water, Emmanuel Macron, his big pal, best pal perhaps, to use a Peter Mandelson phrase, is struggling, having lost his own prime minister and hastily replacing him with somebody else. Further afield, Zelensky's not doing well. So much for the coalition of the willing. Apparently it's a coalition of the witless, with nothing really useful happening at all in Ukraine, apart from the tragic, horrible loss of life by the thousand in the killing fields of a retreating front run by the professional comedian and amateur politician. That's Vladimir Zelensky himself. Nobody's laughing about it because the Russians are losing people too. But at least they're gaining land, and the land that he could have handed over for free, in other words, no loss of life. But oh no, Zelensky had to carry on this facade. I wonder what else is going on that makes him so keen for the West to shovel tons of money and loads of bombs and bullets into that broken state, one which is notorious for corruption, one which arguably is actually keeping the global arms industry well armed and a lot of palms well oiled, well greased. Where did Zelensky get his millions? I'll leave that hanging for now. Maybe we'll answer it in the future. So what is to be done back in the United Kingdom? Can Keir Starmer arrive? This relentless storm preventing him from reaching a safe port for his political situation. I think he's being swept to sea more and more with every day. But who am I to speak about this on my own? Joining me now is a friend of the programme, a regular visitor, and it's none other than Warren Thornton. Warren Thornton. Good day, Warren. Thanks for joining me at a time when we've got choppy seas in British politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Of course, there is going to be all sorts of problems, isn't there? Because, of course, Starmer's away at the moment trying to do the deal with Moldova. He spends more time away from the UK than he does at home. And, of course, while he does, he leaves that sort of thing up to the next most powerful man after Keir Starmer is Morgan McSweeney. And he's going around making...
Lammy, surely, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Lammy's still, let's face it, this is a guy who just sits in the back of taxis and quaffs his way through the Foreign Office budget when he was Foreign Office Minister. Now he's been put out to pasture as Deputy Prime Minister. He's just there to be shot at question time.
Oh, it'd be great to see him doing PMQs. That's going to be just an absolute comedy genius. Unlike Zelensky, Lammy will be funny, but not on purpose. Tell us about this Morgan McSweeney character. Who is he? What is he?
Basically, he's behind the screen, behind the scenes stranger, if you like, a part of his inner circle. And he's probably the sort of Alistair Campbell was to Tony Blair. So he's the party's director of campaigns, and he's played a key role in elevating Keir Starmer from leadership contender to Prime Minister, well in with the Israel lobby. He was introduced to Keir Starmer by Steve Reed, who's the new Environment Secretary. And, of course, the pair launched the think tank Labour Together, created as a sanctuary for Labour moderates, of which Mr McSweeney, of course, was the director of between 2017 and 2020. And he mirrored the task he undertook in Lambeth, just identifying Starmer as the go-to guy.
I don't want to be rude or ageist, but he looks about 12.
He does, yes. Of course, everybody's got their behind the screen stranger, haven't they? And of course, he's very sort of thought of well politically, but he's making all sorts of gaffes. I mean, he's made Shabana Mahmood the Home Secretary, and of course, Yvette Cooper has moved up to Foreign Minister, obviously to Foreign Secretary. And of course, they've moved Lammy because he's an embarrassment. They put him in as Deputy PM.
That's going to be even more embarrassing. Just before we talk about Lammy and everybody else and Starmer. So this guy, Morgan McSweeney, I'd be willing to bet that most of the viewership has never heard of him.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Why is he so powerful then? And why didn't more people know about him?
Well, it's one of those where as soon as Alistair Campbell got known, I mean, if you remember, he had Sue Gray as well, who was his chief of staff, and she had a controversial thing during the COVID. Then they have Matthew Doyle, who was a former Home Secretary to Lord Blunkett, before moving on to Tony Blair. Tony Blair and Mandelson, always been good friends. And, of course, Deborah Mattinson, who was a former pollster for Gordon Brown. So it's not like this. These are all Blairites, every single one of them. And, of course, he's very much still got his hand in there. Blair Mandelson, of course, has got a lot of political clout. No more. Starmer's had to cut him loose. And if he loses this guy, McSweeney, then Starmer is a walking dead duck. But while McSweeney is there, and he's this Blairite, of course, they're not going to get rid of Starmer.
Right. So, okay, we've got this guy in the back room. Didn't realise his power myself, to be honest with you. Here's Peter Mandelson, desperately trying to justify his position.
Tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. And I regret very much.
Now, let's think about that. Let's just stop.
I fell for his lies.
Just stop it. Let's just stop him there, right? Okay. He regrets carrying on his association as long as he did. So he's happy to have had some association with him. That's not even logical. And also, more fundamentally, Warren, what's he saying? He's saying he regrets meeting him because Peter Mandelson's such a dreadful judge of character, so weak-willed or so narcissistic that he just couldn't help becoming best pals with Epstein.
Yes, the trouble is with Mandelson is he's one of those very oily. He's seen as a very oily character who's always smoothing up to people, and of course he's not. He doesn't have very many friends at all. Of course, he came to power under Blair and Gordon Brown, and of course he was very much one of the movers and the shakers behind that when the transition from Blair to Brown happened. He's always had enormous power wherever he is. Of course, he worked with Cameron on the Brexit thing as well. He's always been in and around the shakers. He sort of knows where a lot of bodies are buried. As Anne Widdecombe once said about, I think it was Michael Howard, there's something of the night about him. And the same thing could be produced at Mandelson. I remember Harry Enfield once met him and said, "In the name of God, go, you're absolutely ghastly."
Really?
Yes, yeah.
Harry Enfield.
Yes, yes.
Well, I used to have to work with him. I worked with him when he was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. And he lied to me a bit. I mentioned this on another show recently. And then he lied to me and the late David Trimble a lot. We were both in very important positions. And we were doing something and he betrayed us. It could only have worked if myself and David hadn't shared notes. As soon as we realised what he'd done, I was sure I didn't want to work with him anymore. Within days, as it turns out, I didn't have to worry about it because that was the second time he got fired or had to resign due to some impropriety of some sort or other. I don't actually feel that strongly about people making mistakes. The problem I've got is less to do with Mandelson, because he can't help himself, and more to do with the people around him. But let's just have a look at what Starmer said, if we can get the... I think we've got the evidence of him getting full confidence. While we're working. Yeah, here we are. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just play this. This is the full confidence commitment by the wonderful Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, as should all of us in this House, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Poland and all our NATO allies against Putin's aggression. A NATO country has just had to defend itself against Russian drones. Now, more than ever, we need our ambassador to Washington fully focused on this issue and liaising closely with America. Does the Prime Minister have full confidence in Peter Mandelson?
Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying the victims of Epstein are at the forefront of our minds. He was a despicable criminal who committed the most heinous crimes and destroyed the lives of so many women and girls. The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
Well, that's pretty clear cut, isn't it? Confidence in Peter Mandelson. And this is on the Wednesday. And it seems to me, Warren, that Keir Starmer is quite clearly comfortable with everything that was known, and he was willing to let Mandelson carry on in the most important ambassadorial position that the UK appoints.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. And of course, the Americans weren't happy about it. They were the ones who pretty much insisted, and having to walk it back is pretty awful. But he was in between a rock and a hard place, wasn't he? Let's face it, after Rachel Reeves' tearful sort of welling up, shall we say, when he refused to back her, he pretty much had to do that for Mandelson. And he did have to do that for Mandelson because, of course, Mandelson still got people from the Brown-Blair era around, in and around Keir Starmer. And, of course, Mandelson is seen as, if you like, you know, the go-to guy for this, that, and the other. But there's almost nobody that I know of. Trust Mandelson. I mean, I think he'd sell his own grandmother for a £5 note. And then, of course, Starmer after that tried to get the rest of the House on side by saying about this crazy thing, you know, with the going to see this NATO thing with the Russian drones, and it's not time to talk about this. Turns out, of course, that these drones were complete nonsense. And, of course, his whole sort of thing then deflected back towards, obviously, Mandelson. And he had to come clean because there's no question in my mind, Lembit, that he knew the full extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, let's look at it. Let's look at what happened within 24 hours. 24 hours of Keir Starmer, the drifting Prime Minister, the rudderless leader, saying he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson. This happened.
There, but what we saw in those statements from the Foreign Office Minister Stephen Doughty was some significant breaking news. Lord Peter Mandelson has been sacked as the British ambassador to the United States. We have a statement from the Foreign Office. We heard it just then. I'll just recap it. It says, in light of the additional information in emails written by Peter Mandelson, the Prime Minister has asked the Foreign Secretary to withdraw him as ambassador. The emails show that the depth and extent of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, of course, Mr. Epstein, the late convicted sex offender, is materially different from that known at the time of his appointment.
Okay, so now, right, within 24 hours of giving Mandelson his confidence, he fires him. Apparently, now we have to be very specific about this, because I think that this is potentially the death knell for Starmer. Apparently, because he just got new information between Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday and the announcement to fire him. Now, you're saying he probably already knew.
Oh, without a question of a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt. The security team, when you go in for these positions, Lembit, very simply, your vetting team are looking for any smoking gun that the opposition will get. It's not so much how good you are at the job, it's can they nail you on anything. Look what's just happened with Annalena Baerbock in the UN, where she said it was perfectly okay for Israel to bomb Gaza. She said she didn't say it, and then, of course, there's footage showing that she did. So when you vet people for these positions, you have to make sure. So the fact that they didn't know is rather like the Canadian in the Houses of the Nazi in the Canadian Houses of Parliament. That, you know, everybody saying that they didn't know. They knew full well who this guy was. The security teams would have vetted him. These people wouldn't be let anywhere near the corridors of power if there is something wrong in that particular area. So Starmer had to know, because the person who will certainly know is McSweeney will know, the chairman of the party will know, and so will Keir Starmer, no question.
I'll show you a clue now, a crafty clue. Didn't have to dig very far to get this one. Here's a clue that Peter Mandelson, he's the one who's almost undressed there, was quite good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. It's more than a smoking gun. It's a flipping barbecue.
Yeah. Yes.
What can you say?
Let's be honest, Lembit. That picture's been available for a while for anybody who wanted to see it. Now, if you look at that picture of that person with Jeffrey Epstein, do you appoint him, given what is going on with Epstein at the moment in America, where the Congress has just voted 51 to 49 to not publish the Epstein files? Very, very simply, would you then appoint that guy as US ambassador, given the furore that is surrounding Jeffrey Epstein at the moment? Not in a million years, would you? It is quite staggering.
Yeah, that's interesting. For another time, I want to really explore what's going on in America. This is not going to leave Trump alone. Sooner or later, the names are going to come out, probably because the victims will get a congressman to read them out under the protection of Congress, and, well, then all hell will break loose. I just don't see why Trump is preventing this from happening. Very odd. For another time, maybe. The point here is, as well, that there was a way out potentially for Starmer. He said, I know everything. I make the judgment that he's genuinely contrite and he shall carry on in this job unless I find out he's broken the law. He could have said that. But instead, it would have been a hard sell, but he could have done that. Instead, what he said, he could have actually said, I know all about it. And in private conversations, I'm satisfied that by doing X, Y, Z, we respect the victims, but Mandelson needs to carry on. But instead, he changed the story. He went from, I am very confident, to, oh, I didn't know everything. How can it be, just like you said, Warren, how can it be that the Prime Minister didn't know information that everybody else was talking about? And here's the problem. Starmer isn't a good liar because he doesn't make his arguments consistent, doesn't tell his lies consistently. So then he ends up in trouble because his own party is enraged and embarrassed by this, and they didn't like Mandelson anyway.
No, absolutely. And of course, you have to remember that Starmer's got to be whiter than white because he banned any questions whatsoever about the Ukrainian male models who set fire to various properties in a car that he previously owned. So you've got that in the background. And then you look at Mandelson's friendship with Epstein and what Epstein did and the connotations that are around there. I mean, you can't afford another political scandal like that. And of course, now the Labour, shall we say, the people who are not Blairites are very much calling for McSweeney's head because McSweeney was the one who appointed him or told Keir Starmer to appoint him, of course, because McSweeney is previously of the Blair ilk. And of course, anybody who thinks that Blair and of course Mandelson didn't have any power or didn't hold any power in the Labour Party, they were responsible behind the Israel lobby and everybody else getting rid of Williamson and getting rid of Jeremy Corbyn at the time, you know, when they had
Chris Williamson?
Sorry, Chris Williamson and Corbyn at the time, and getting rid of them, which they did in that sort of bloody coup, if you like, that Keir Starmer led.
Yeah, Chris Williamson is a guest with myself and Joe Marnie. That's going to be broadcast. If you're watching this from the archive, you can already find it. A two-parter. It really got into lots of detail, and Joe and Chris started arguing big time about Gaza and Israel. Joe being much more sympathetic to Israel than, as you can imagine, Chris Williamson is. So that's something to look for. You'll find that in the archive, or you can see it live as well, depending when you're watching this. Now, you've said a couple of interesting things here. It seems to me at the very core of this, the following question must be answered. When did Keir Starmer get all the information? Now, you're saying it would beg a belief if he hadn't had the information before Prime Minister's questions. And I think everybody really believes that. Any sane thinking person would assume that the Prime Minister had all the information. And on top of that, Peter Mandelson himself said there will be more embarrassing revelations before PMQs. He said it himself. It wasn't like a secret. Everybody was waiting to see what it was going to be. Now, it seems to me that Starmer has dropped the biggest blunder of all time here by trying to make us believe he didn't know something. Here's what Laura Trott, who is a Conservative, was saying about it and demanding clarity.
His message calling the socialite and sex offender his best pal caused embarrassment for Number 10. A week that began with questions over the now former ambassador to the US has ended with them pointed at the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer's government now has to explain what they knew and when.
We knew all the publicly available information. We knew that he had an association with Epstein that went beyond his conviction. These were put into the context of the challenges the country faced and the talents we needed to get to serve the country at that moment in time. Of course, if we knew then what we know now, he wouldn't have been appointed. It wouldn't have been appropriate.
The man Peter Mandelson had been deployed to influence in Washington was also implicated in the Epstein documents released to the public, which may explain why some felt him appropriate for the role. But the family of...
And that's the point, and there's the family. That goes on to say that they're going to expose it all anyway. But that's the problem. The man in the picture there, Donald Trump, he's not going to be enjoying this very much, is he? Because it just won't go away.
No, it's another, you know, when everybody's going out and saying it's a hoax and everything else. Well, if it's a hoax, why isn't Peter Mandelson going to the United States? So every time that people are coming out and saying it's, you know, nothing to see here, gov honest, it's a bit like Leslie Nielsen when he's saying everybody's moved back and the building behind them is on fire. The problem that we have, Lembit, it's true though, isn't it? The problem that we have, here's the thing, when you have someone, no, I know this for absolute, and I'm pretty sure you do as well, Lembit, when you have somebody vetted for a position, MI6 files, MI5 files, so foreign and domestic files are available to you from the security services for anything that might come up that might be a problem. So Keir Starmer, without question, knew. And in fact, when you set this in motion, he would have turned around and said, Peter Mandelson or McSweeney would have said, let's have Peter Mandelson for US ambassador. This hasn't just come out, Lembit. This was put forward or proposed a while back. At that moment in time, you have already sent for those files. And if you are turning around and telling me that Prime Minister of Great Britain, then either McSweeney didn't tell Starmer that was in the files, or Starmer knew. Either way, if McSweeney didn't tell him, he's got to fire McSweeney, who's the head of his base, which he can't do because he's a dead man walking if he does that, or he's got to take it on the chin, or he knew. So there's one of those two scenarios, Lembit. But either way, it's another unbelievable mess up by the Labour government.
Yeah, but look at this. This is Donald Trump shaking hands with Mandelson. but I've never regarded as particularly clubbable. This is a problem at the heart of the relationship between Britain and America, because Trump just can't escape the Epstein files. And yet now he's shaking hands with a man who was best pals with Epstein, in his own words. I have to say, this is going to cast something of a shadow over Trump's visit, because the press conferences are going to be about this, aren't they?
Of course it is. And of course you see him reach back with his other hand and give his other hand, give his arm a squeeze after he'd finished shaking hands. You're going to get this because, you've just had the Congress vote to block the Epstein files coming out by 51 to 49. This is just going to run and run and run. You've got so many things going on here. And of course, you're telling everybody there's nothing to see here. And of course, the circus is being built around you as you're telling people there's nothing to see.
It's really awkward. And now let's go to the next aspect of this. And this keeps getting worse. I mean, it just keeps getting worse. The reality here is, let's have a look at, just to lay it on the line here. That's the problem he's got. Because by association, Starmer was essentially protecting Peter Mandelson. And we are meant to believe that Starmer didn't know on Tuesday, very specific point, on Tuesday, all this stuff that everybody else assumed or knew. Because the crucial problem for Starmer is this, that he claims he got new information between Prime Minister's questions midday on the Wednesday, and then when he fired him, which is really just a matter of hours later, really. So he has to now prove that he didn't know all of this beforehand. Or to be even more precise, it turns out that if it can be proved he did have that information, then he's in a lot of trouble. I don't know if you know the ministerial code. It's pretty clear. Let's get the ministerial code up here. Here it is. Let me read it. This is the ministerial code by which all ministers, including the Prime Minister, are bound. The misleading of Parliament is the knowing presentation of false information to Parliament, a very serious charge in Westminster system parliamentary assemblies. By convention, government ministers who are found to have misled Parliament will generally lose their ministerial portfolio. In common parlance, that means if we can show that Starmer lied to Parliament about not knowing the data, he's toast.
Yes, and what they need is a whistleblower for that, because now people are pushing very hard because they're saying, well, why didn't you know? Because you would have had his MI5 and MI6 files. So what does Keir Starmer do? He turns around and goes, oh, well, so-and-so, McSweeney, he saw the files. I didn't. I was in another country or whatever. Now, if he does that, he's got to throw his guy under the bus, who then didn't inform him, which is incompetence, which means he's got to resign, or Starmer's got to get rid of him, or Starmer's got to tell the truth and go, I knew, I didn't think it was too big a deal or anything else. But to turn around and say that he didn't know, when you put someone forward for this position, Lembit, you are vetting them weeks in advance, and I mean weeks in advance, and everything that is possible to know about their lives, private and public life, is out there for everybody to examine. It's not like this happens overnight. When you're going as an ambassador to the US, you certainly don't. Say, for instance, you're going as an ambassador to the US. We don't want to find out that you once met with people who were working for Hamas or something along these lines. So you are vetted very carefully. And they go back over all your speeches, Lembit, to make sure that you haven't said something derogatory or inflammatory into the position you're going, especially as an ambassador. It is an unbelievably important. And in fact, I spoke to Peter Ford on this, who is he works for obviously for the Workers' Party of Great Britain now, but he is a former British ambassador, and he went to Bahrain and everything else. Very much out in the Middle East. He's been a British ambassador over 10 years, and he turned around and said there is absolutely no way that they wouldn't know before you get appointed.
But but let's remember that, now you remind me, Peter Mandelson actually said Trump was, and I quote, a danger to the world.
Yes,
he said that. But then he said he was wrong later. But hang on a sec. So you were wrong about that as well. You were wrong about what you, Peter Mandelson, said about the President of the United States of America. It's unbelievable, really. It's like Lammy calling him a neo-Nazi sympathising, woman-hating sociopath.
Yes, or Sadiq Khan putting a floating pig of Donald Trump up above, just unbelievable. This thing always comes back to bite them. Did they think when they said these things? Trump won't want this Epstein thing anywhere near him anyway. It's toxic and everything else. But do you think after all the things that Starmer and everybody said about Trump on the run-up to the election, that they sent people to stump for them? Labour Party actually sent people out there to stump up for Kamala Harris and support her. The Labour Party did that with 100 activists. They don't think for 1 second that they might turn around and get a little bit of revenge.
It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. There is no aspect of this relationship with America that Starmer's handled well. And he even ended up in a spat with Trump about free speech. Quite rightly, because Trump said free speech was in trouble here. And J.D. Vance really drove the point home. And Starmer's going on up free speech has been here for a long time, but it will be here for a long time. But he sounded like a teenager being ignored by a teacher. And now the Mandelson thing is going to keep running. Maybe by the time you're watching this, if you're watching it on the archive, you'll know how this pans out. But I think there's a serious prospect that Starmer will have to resign. I put it at 50-50 now. I wouldn't put it more than that, but even still have to resign if it can be proved that he lied. Now, the Conservatives know this, and that's why they're pushing so hard on it, because, as you say, only takes one single person to say he knew. And I actually think that's already been announced. But the mainstream media is so scared of having a fight with the establishment cabal, because they know that reform will come in and probably get rid of the TV license. Basically, and actually Nigel Farage told me that he will get rid of the TV license one way or another, that they're basically protecting him. And I think that's the only reason he's still in post. Then, of course, let's just remind ourselves, it's not exactly been smooth sailing because of another lady. It was what a great picture that is. What a fun, great Deputy Prime Minister she was, who had to resign as well. These are 2 resignations in 2 weeks after the great reset that Keir Starmer promised the country. She must be loving this, because it makes it more likely there'll be a vacancy at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, she's not a Blairite. She was more of a Corbynite than a Blairite. Here's the thing. When you sort of look at that, though, someone's head has to roll for the embarrassment of Mandelson. So who's it going to be? Because if Starmer gets rid of his top boy, McSweeney, he's then unbelievably vulnerable. He's vulnerable. And of course, Mandelson is going to be champing at the bit, because remember that Mandelson and Blair and Brown were very much all that cabal that came up together, and they wielded a lot of power in the Labour Party, Lembit, and they didn't want it going down the Corbyn route or the Williamson route, and of course they made sure that was so. The Conservatives tend to do Night of the Long Knives, but the Labour Party do it just as ruthlessly as well. And Angela Rayner will be sticking the knife in and twisting it. I wouldn't be surprised if Rachel Reeves might drop the odd comment off camera, because, of course, he failed to support her. So Starmer's sort of, how can I put it? He's known for throwing people under the bus. But it looks very much as though his bus is about to run out of diesel.
So, yeah, putting all this together, Starmer's completely adrift. I think it's one more strike and he's out. I actually want him to stay in post because it guarantees Labour won't win the next election.
Yes.
It would be better because it's in the interest of the country. I don't make any secret of the fact that I think that this is the worst performing government in my lifetime. I've never known any government to do worse than this, and actively so, perniciously so. Lying to us about the ethnicity of us murdering scum who killed children in Southport, putting people in prison for hurty words, presiding over a police service that arrests women in silent prayer outside closed abortion clinics, arresting evangelical Christians in the south of England. All of this happening under Keir Starmer, who also can't afford the heating allowance for the elderly, but can afford to waste billions in a failurous war in Ukraine. And then hangs around with Macron, who's obviously lost control as well. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. And I just don't see. I want him to stay on for the reasons I say. They're quite pragmatic, maybe even perhaps almost dark, because we have to make sure. I think we have to make sure that this government fails, because otherwise the worst thing would be another 5 years of this after 5 years of it, and the country would be finished. But what do you think? Do you think Starmer can survive?
I think he could survive. He could, end up throwing his guy under the bus or throwing someone under because he's very much like that. He'll cut people loose as soon as look at them. But it's rather like Macron. He's in the last chance. He's drinking in the last chance saloon because Le Cornu, if he turns against Macron,
Le Cornu, the new Prime Minister. Yeah.
Yes, France. And of course, Macron wants to stay on for another year so he can get the head of the EU. He's just got to hang on for that another year. Starmer's got to hang on for a lot longer. And remember that there is a very powerful lobby out there, the Bilderberg Group, to do with bankers and everybody else, who sort of anoint, if you like the World Economic Forum, the next person going up to be top boy, as it were. And of course, David Lammy was at the Bilderberg Group in 2024, and Wes Streeting was the one who attended in 2025. So these two guys, one of them is obviously you've got the health minister, and David Lammy is now deputy leader. So if they do decide
deputy prime minister, not deputy leader, deputy leader of the Labour Party being elected by the party
but if they do decide to throw them under the bus, Lembit, the Bilderberg Group have got these two guys in position ready to go.
One last thought about the whole Mandelson fiasco. David Lammy, as Foreign Secretary, surely was responsible for vetting this appointment as well.
No, because he's been moved to Deputy Prime Minister.
No, but he was Foreign Secretary. He was Foreign Secretary when Mandelson was appointed.
Yeah, well, in that case, he is responsible. But let's be honest, Lembit. David Lammy, responsible for anything? I mean, honestly.
He's responsible for a big food bill.
Exactly.
And an absent fishing licence. I don't judge people to be for things I can't do better myself. But the problem is these people are all so happy to criticise the Tories, so quick to slam Conservative mistakes and errors. We promised that they would clean up the sleaze, and just right, left and centre, they're not. If they'd said, no one's perfect, we'll try and do better, but we're just humans and please bear with us, then now they say, we said no one's perfect. But actually...
You know where the MI6 file is, Lembit. He's left it in the back of the taxi with the other rubbish.
But then the last thing, the question is, will Keir Starmer be needing a new form of transport in the near future? Removal bans.
Yes, absolutely. He does need to go. I mean, he is the most unpopular Prime Minister that there's ever been. And let's face it, he's left. He's abdicated his responsibility because most of this mess is being overseen by McSweeney because he is so busy playing Coalition of the Willing, going to Brussels, meeting in Moldova now where he's doing up to all sorts of shady deals, going and hugging Zelensky and sort of jet-setting around the world rather than dealing with anything at home, which he's left to McSweeney, who's made an awful, pig's ear of it.
That was close to use bad language there. Thank you for not doing so. Thanks very much indeed. Just to ask you, where can we get another dose of Warren Thornton?
You can find us Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with our regular news show every single evening, British summertime. And of course, on Sunday night, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., we are joined by the wonderful erudite Lembit Öpik.
Thank you for saying. And indeed, later on today, it depends if you're watching this live or on the archive, you will find part of Warren Thornton's excellent programme, but you need to go to his paywall to see the whole show. Warren, thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate your views. That is Warren Thornton, investigative journalist there. Have your say as well. You can go to X and also please subscribe on YouTube. It really helps us a lot. It really makes a big difference to us. And it doesn't cost you anything. So subscribe to Unprecedented TV at YouTube and you will find a cornucopia of programs, literally hundreds of programs there that you may have missed first time round. Once again, we're always expanding our offerings, so we're going to do some live events quite soon as well. And if you are a subscriber, you'll be able to apply for tickets. I'm Lembit Öpik. Thanks very much for watching. Let's see if our predictions are right or wrong. Have a very good day. This was Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you?
Boring. 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 Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. That's exactly what we're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages,